Good evening, YouTube. This is the Atheist Chef. Now, I am a little bit excited because I get to respond to an Jason Burns video. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is that exciting? Because he has a lot of videos. You could have picked any of them. Well, one, this was short. It was like a minute long, so that worked out great for me because I'm on a limited time constraint there. So I could respond to that. Secondly, it was about the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Bible. Which one's older, which one's more accurate, etc., and things like that. You'll see his arguments in a minute. But I've done a lot of research on this, so I was like, yes, this is my chance. I get to do it. Yes. So, without any further ado, let's begin.
If you read the Epic of Gilgamesh on the flood, you'll find that it's more embellished.
Now, as far as which one is more embellished, let's kind of give you a really brief overview of the story for the Epic of Gilgamesh. Basically, some gods are kind of hanging out, and one of the gods is like, you know what, screw these people need to die. One of the other gods, or a messenger of the gods, was like, no, somebody's got to stop this, not everybody needs to die. So they tell one man, and I can't think of his name, but it starts with a U, like Erdkachim. It's a really weird name, I ain't gonna bother saying it. So he says, hey, look, this god's pissed, he wants to kill everybody, so what you need to do, you need to really build a big boat, make it equal on all sides, get some family members, get your friends, hide your kids, hide your wife, because they're raping everybody out here. Sorry, anyways. Get some animals, get enough food and stuff to last you for a good while, because he's about to flood it, so get ready. Get a whole bunch of pitch, make the boat, let's get going. So then the god makes the flood waters, he kills everybody. 7 days, guy's up in the water, up on top of the water, and he lands up on a mountain, and he sends out a bird, and he sends out another bird, raven and a dove, and then it comes back, and he lands, and he sacrifices to a god. And then another gods, and they fight over each other. They're saying, hey, this was a bad idea, you shouldn't have done this. Now, I know Jason Burns also said, Burns, it also says embellished, but I'm just going to give a few more details. As far as the first part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the actual flood part, it's about 17 to 1800 words. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh, as far as the Tablet 11, and I believe also Tablet 12, which is all part of the same little bit, if I remember correctly, or it's just Tablet 11. Anyways, those two parts equal to be about 2,900 words. Now, I'm not including the second part because basically in the second part, it's basically the protagonist trying to become a god, but it's really not dealing with the flood. Now, we're going to deal with Noah's flood. Now, Noah's flood, from God first telling Noah, or then talking about how evil people were, right up to the point of God telling Noah he was going to make rainbows. That's about 2,100 words. So just by sheer word volume to the actual flood story, the Epic of Gilgamesh is down by about 300 to 400 words. But now let's talk about the actual story, the actual little bit, why I'd say that the Bible is a bit more embellished. When you think about the Bible, we have every human being was a terrible person. They were all evil, and even the innocent babies and animals and all those things, they all deserve to die. So the omnipotent, omniscient, all benevolent being of the universe decides to flood everybody. So he warns Noah, and he tells them to get the boat, get your closest family members, get every animal kind in the world, and put it on your boat. So store food and store water for a long time, because you're going to be there for a long time. So the floods come and kills every animal, everything, every person out there. And so Noah and his company are in a boat for over a year with every animal in the world, with enough food and water for all of them for that long. And then he comes down, and the water comes down after a year, and now he sacrifices some animals to his god, and Now he says, look, I'm going to make a rainbow because apparently before God defied physics and didn't allow people to see refracted light. If you want to say that the Epic of Gilgamesh is more embellished, I would have to say that the idea of Epic of Gilgamesh, his story, is less embellished because some of the things make a little bit more sense. Let's talk about how the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the boat, it took kith and kin. Kith is friends and family and neighbors and stuff like that. Well, kin is family, but so friends and neighbors. So there was already more people on the boat, and he took some craftsmen along with him from different kinds. So, able to rebuild a population with more than Noah's 8 people, and 4 of them being family. So incest, and a lot less incest with the other family, and a lot more genetic variation. Noah up in the boat with every animal species for 1 year, and the protagonist in the Epic of Gilgamesh for like 7 days. The Bible completely has Epic of Gilgamesh beat when it comes to embellishment.
So there are jewels taken onto the ark, etc.
Oh my god, there's jewels on the boat! Because, every kind of animal known to man, 8 people, and tons of water, and millions of pounds of food. That makes sense. But jewels, holy fucking shit.
Secondly, there is a different understanding of God. One is, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is polytheistic, and in the Jewish account, it is monotheistic. So there's a big difference there.
Wrong. Try again, Jason Burns. Actually, we know at this time is the early Israelites were polytheistic, and we have this with archaeological data and documentary hypothesis proving this to be the case. Now, at this particular time, these Israelites were worshiping the Canaanite gods from the Canaanite pantheon, and at this point, this was the god El. This is why we have like the angels, Michael, Raphael, Gabriel. Basically, most of the names of angels were named blank of God, and El is the name of God for the Canaanite god. So, with that and much of other, many other reasons, we know that the Israelites were polytheistic. So, both the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Bible were polytheistic at this point before it was re-edited and everything. But even if not, how is that relevant? I guess that's maybe just to argue for what's changed or what's different about them, but really, and I don't know if you're just going to use that a little bit later on to say that this is obviously inferior, which is a word you'll use later on, but that really has nothing to do with it.
There is also a marked triviality within the Gilgamesh, and a lack of reason and explanation for various things within the story.
As far as the Epic of Gilgamesh goes, when they asked in the story itself, it doesn't tell you that the why the god Enlil would want to flood everyone else. However, if you actually have done other research in some of the other similar stories, they actually say that, I believe it's Enlil and Enki, they actually are just irritated by the sounds of so many humans and people living on Earth. That there was an overpopulation and the sounds were driving them and they couldn't sleep, so they said, screw it, let's kill them all. Now, this of course is compared to the gods, well, you're not doing as I say, you're not living the way that I want you to, so I'm going to kill everybody. So there is either way, both of these stories have really shitty explanations for causing a global flood and killing everybody in a mass genocide. So, really, not too much difference between the two.
So, obviously, it's an inferior copy of the original flood story.
I honestly would love to know if those qualifications, the perceived over-embellishment, the lack of explanation, and the being polytheistic, if that's what makes it inferior, of a story, if that's really what he is, what he thinks, I'm sorry, but you are not qualified to call what is an inferior version of the story.
What do you think? I'll link to an article.
As a little side note before I continue on, I was reading the Epic of Gilgamesh once again, and I came across something that I found really quite interesting. I'm surprised I didn't notice it before. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, not long after the flood, the main protagonist is trying to achieve more immortality. Now, he gets this because the god has touched him in his head, and he said, hey, if you can stay awake for 7 days, then you get to survive, be a god. And he fails at that. And so he's like, hey, what else, something I can do? And the guy's like, hey, well, there's this magic plant. And the plant is basically called the, from old become young, basically. So, long story short, it's essentially like one of those eternal life plants where you bite into it and you become young again. Quite similar to that whole tree of eternal life, just saying. But, shortly after that, a snake comes along and takes the plant. Snake, eternal life, snake, going from young to old, which again is pretty much eternal life. Continue to eat it. Anybody noticing any similarities between the two? Just saying. Anybody? Anybody? Raise a hand. Anybody? Okay. Now, as far as the Epic of Gilgamesh is concerned, we have the earliest known Sumerian writings of the Gilgamesh story around 2100 to 2000 BC. We actually even have the Akkadian version of this, the whole unified set, between 2000 and 1500 BC. Now, why this is relevant is because, especially in the Sumerian one, we actually have the story of the epic hero, the king Gilgamesh, meeting the flood hero from that story. So they have this written down around 2000 BC. If not then, we'll say 1500 BC. That's a very conservative, and that's just from the Akkadian one. That's completely ignoring the Sumerian version. But so anywhere between 2100 and 1500 BC, we already have the story written down. Now, if the story has been written down, we would have to assume it's probably been orally passed on for quite some time as well. Now, when you compare this to the Bible, now the argued age from particularly fundamentalist Christians is that it's between 1300 and 1400 when Moses was transcribed, when this was handed down to Moses from God. So 13 to 1400, so say 1400 BC compared to 2100 to 1500 BC. So that alone, we have that beat. Secondly, 1400 to 1300 BC for the writings of the original Torah and the first 5 books of the Bible. It's Tanakh or Torah, I forget. But the first 5 books of the Bible, thanks to the work of countless historians, scholars, and linguists, we know this is between 900 and 600 BC. So that's even more time away from the earliest known transcription of the story, of a flood story, to the biblical version. Not only that, but there was recently a cuneiform tablet, really small one, I'm going to try and find the link below, where we actually see a similar story from the Babylonian, the Epic of Gilgamesh, to a small little tablet that actually even mentions for the first time, this is the earliest writing that mentions animals going into a boat 2 by 2. The Epic of Gilgamesh didn't really have that, but the Bible did. But this cuneiform tablet, which is dated older than the Bible, has this. So what we can see is there is an evolution in the story, and we can see where the Bible picks up from this cuneiform tablet, which also picks up from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, if what I've said hasn't clarified my position on which came first, this should probably seal the deal. Now, what we know about earliest languages, and we can study language. We have historians and scholars and linguists. We can look at their alphabet, we can look at the dialects, and we can understand where they came from, their sources, and all that kind of different stuff. And so, let me tell you what they've discovered. Now, the Sumerian writings, which pretty much started around 3000 BC. This is the group of people that I told you had written that first tablet around 2100 to 2000 BC, which had the first mention of the Gilgamesh, where he got to meet the actual the flood hero, the flood protagonist. That was around 2000 BC. And then the Akkadians, which is the group of people that had written the entire set of the Epic of Gilgamesh, at least the first one that we could find. That was between 2000 and 1500 BC, still 100 years before Moses supposedly, wrote down, or got the divine inspiration to write down the first 5 books of the Bible. Those two languages had long preceded the Canaanite language, which actually stemmed from a type of a Semitic language which appeared around 1400 BC. Around 1400 BC, we have this area by Palestine and Lebanon, and this was the Semitic, Northwest Semitic language. And from that, we have the Canaanite language and alphabet that began to form. And then we have around 1000 BC, we actually have the classical Hebrew. This is the first real spoken Hebrew language, which then spawned the archaic archaic Hebrew language around 1000 BC. Now, as we actually have seen from historians, and they've done all the good fancy scientific and historical and dating and all that stuff and how they do that, but they know, and they've proven this, that the Hebrew language comes from the Canaanite language. So, not only do we know the age of the Hebrew language and the Hebrew writing, about 1000 BC, we know that there was a language 2,000 years older, and then 1,000 years before even the invention of the Hebrew language, which the Bible was written in, the Sumerians had already written a type of flood story that bears an incredible resemblance to the Bible. So, 1,000 years at least before the Bible was written, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, for sure. Period. There is no discussion. You would need to find these historians and, tell them, like, hey, no, you're wrong. The Bible said it first. Moses said it first. And I'm sorry. I wish you good luck with that. But the simple fact is, the Sumerians did it first. They wrote down the Epic of Gilgamesh. The story is much later and much older. Definitely a lot less embellished than the Bible. And, it's just straight obvious that the early Hebrews come from the Canaanites. And this is not even related to what we're originally talking about. But I'm throwing it in there for you. This is a twofer. First, we thought we were talking about just the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now we're also proving that the Hebrews, the Hebrew language, and the Israelites come from the Canaanites. So, I'm sorry. Somebody's going to have to come up with some really convincing evidence if you're going to try and tell me that Noah's flood was the oldest flood story. But that's it. This is the Atheist Chef signing off. Peace.